A billionaire finds his maid's daughter secretly washing dishes, and he's about to discover the desperate truth she'll do anything to hide. 3 a.m. Billionaire Arthur Coleman, walking his silent halls, finds an unexpected sight in his cavernous kitchen. Claire, a 17-year-old girl, his housekeeper's daughter, is scrubbing a mountain of dinner plates. Her hands are red and raw. Her eyes are wide with terror. She should be in school. Instead, she is here, telling lies to protect a desperate secret. The billionaire, a man who built his fortune reading people, knows this is more than a girl helping her mother. It's a clue to a sacrifice he can't yet understand. He built an empire on seeing patterns, but sleep was a price he could not pay. Arthur Coleman found silence to be the loudest sound in his vast, empty mansion tonight. That silence was broken. The great clock in the foyer chimed 3 a.m. The sound was heavy, each chime echoing down the marble hallway. Arthur Coleman stood at the top of the grand staircase, his silk robe pulled tight. He was a man who had built a global shipping empire. He did it by predicting problems. He could see a storm in the South China Sea and know, instantly, which 300 ships needed to change course. He could not, however, predict a solution for his own insomnia. He rubbed his eyes. The house was cold. He was returning from the library, a heavy book on Roman history, unread in his hand. He had tried to read. He had tried to listen to music. He had tried to meditate. But his mind, the asset that built his fortune, would not shut down. That is when he heard it. It was not a dangerous sound. His security was absolute. No one could get onto this property. It was a small sound, a secret sound, the sound of a glass being gently placed on granite. Arthur froze. He listened. The sound came from the ground floor, at the far end of the house, from the main kitchen, the quiet, rhythmic friction of a sponge on a plate. He moved down the hall, his leather slippers silent on the plush runners. He descended the staircase, his mind racing. It was not a thief. A thief would not be washing dishes. It was an employee. But why? At this hour? He pushed open the heavy oak door to the main kitchen. The room was dark, lit only by the small, yellow light above the industrial stove. The kitchen was enormous, designed for catering large parties. It was a cavern of stainless steel and dark wood. There, dwarfed by the counters, was a girl. She was hunched over the deep steel sink, her back to him. She looked small and thin. She was scrubbing a crystal wine glass with a focused, desperate energy. Arthur cleared his throat. The girl gasped, a sharp intake of air. She spun around so fast she fumbled the glass. It slipped from her soapy hands. "Oh!" she cried, lunging for it. She caught it, just barely, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes were wide. She was not just startled. She was terrified. It was a terror that seemed far too large for a simple surprise. "Mr. Coleman," she breathed. He did not recognize her. He had staff, but he rarely saw them. They were managed by his head of staff, George. "Who are you?" His voice was not unkind, but it was the voice of a man used to answers. I'm Claire, sir. Claire Miller." She frantically dried her hands on a dish rag, her eyes darting between him and the door. "I'm Helen's daughter." Helen Miller, his housekeeper. Arthur's mind clicked into place. Helen. A good woman. Reliable, quiet, always professional. Helen had been with him for 5 years. "Claire," Arthur said, stepping fully into the kitchen. He flicked on the main lights. The room flooded with a sterile white glare. The sudden brightness made the girl flinch. He saw her clearly now. She was young, perhaps 17. She had blonde hair, but it was pulled back in a messy, frayed ponytail. Strands of it were stuck to her damp forehead. She was pale. The skin under her eyes was not just shadowed. It was dark, bruised with a profound exhaustion. She looked like a soldier who had been on the front lines for weeks. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Arthur asked, his voice softer now. "Where is your mother?" "She's sick, sir," Claire said. The words came out too fast, too rehearsed. "Just a bad cold. She felt terrible. She was so worried about the dishes from your party. I told her I'd take care of it so she could rest." Arthur's eyes drifted from the girl to the sink. It was piled high. The remains of his 30-person dinner party. Plates, pans, platters, dozens of glasses. It was a catering-level mess. It was work for 3 people, not 1 child. "A bad cold," Arthur repeated. He looked back at her. His mind was analyzing the lie. It was a bad lie. A child her age should be sleeping. "And she sent you," he said, "at 3 o'clock in the morning to do her work?" "No!" Claire's voice was sharp, suddenly protective. The terror was replaced by a flash of anger. "She didn't send me. She doesn't know I'm here. I let myself in. I have a key. I help her on weekends. Sometimes I know her routine. I wanted to get it done before she woke up, so she wouldn't worry." It was a brave lie, Arthur thought, but a lie nonetheless. "You should be in bed," Arthur said, crossing his arms. "You have school tomorrow. Today, rather." Claire flinched. It was a tiny, almost invisible movement, a tightening of her shoulders, a quick drop of her eyes. Arthur saw it. He had built his fortune reading the flinches of his competitors across a boardroom table. A flinch meant a hidden truth. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I'll be done soon. I promise I won't disturb you again. I'm very quiet." She turned back to the sink, as if he had been dismissed. It was a clear signal. "Please leave." Arthur did not leave. He stood there for a full minute, watching her scrub. He saw her small hands, red and raw from the hot water and soap. He looked around the kitchen. His eyes landed on a backpack slumped by the service door. It was an old, faded blue backpack. The zippers were strained. It looked heavy. Dangling from the main zipper was a bright blue and gold honor cord. Arthur's eyes narrowed. He knew that cord. It was the kind valedictorians wore at graduation. Next to it, tucked into the side mesh pocket, was a small, framed photo. It was old. A young woman and a man in a crisp army uniform. Arthur looked at the girl. He looked at the mountain of dishes. He looked at the honor cord. The honor cord. The 3 a.m. dishwashing. The lie. The exhaustion. These pieces did not fit. They were a broken pattern, and Arthur Coleman hated broken patterns. "Leave the dishes," Arthur said. Claire stopped, her hands frozen in the soapy water. "Sir?" "Leave them. Go home. Get some sleep." "But my mom, she'll be so upset if they aren't done. She'll get in trouble." "I will handle your mother," Arthur said. His tone was not harsh, but it left no room for argument. "Go home, Claire." She hesitated. Her shoulders slumped. It was not just relief, it was defeat. As if she had failed her mission. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." She quickly pulled off the heavy, wet apron. She grabbed her backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and slipped out the service door into the pre-dawn darkness. Arthur stood alone in the massive, silent kitchen. The silence rushed back in, but now it was filled with questions. He looked at the honor cord in his mind's eye, a valedictorian. He looked at the sink, a dishwasher. He went to his study. He did not try to sleep. He sat in his leather chair, watching the black sky turn to gray. He was waiting. At 7 a.m., he picked up his phone. "George," he said when his head of staff answered. George Shaw was a man who had been with him for 20 years. He was precise, efficient, and discreet. "Mr. Coleman, you're up early." "I have 2 tasks for you, George. First, our housekeeper, Helen Miller. What is her situation?" There was a pause. Arthur could hear the faint click of a keyboard. "Mrs. Miller," George said, his voice careful. "She has been inconsistent, sir. Many sick days in the last 2 months. I was actually preparing a file to discuss her dismissal." Hold that file, Arthur ordered. The words came out like cold steel. Second, her daughter, a girl named Claire, about 17. She's a senior in high school. I want to know everything. The school, her grades, her attendance. Sir? George's confusion was plain. This was not a typical request. The girl was here at 3 a.m., George washing the dishes from my party. She looked broken, and she was carrying a valedictorian's honor cord. It doesn't add up. I want to know why. At once, sir. One more thing, George. The girl's backpack. It had a photo. A soldier. Army uniform. 101st Airborne, I think. Find out who he is. Arthur spent the day in a fog. He had meetings about fuel costs and shipping routes. He spoke to executives in Hong Kong and London. But his mind was in the kitchen. He saw the girl's terrified eyes. He saw the honor cord. At 4 p.m., George Shaw appeared at his study door. He held a thin manila folder. Frank never looked ruffled, but today he looked somber. He looked shaken. Sir. He placed the folder on the polished desk. Go on, George. You were right about the girl, George said. He opened the folder. Claire Miller, 17, senior at Northwood High School. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout from the school's website, a beaming photo of Claire holding a certificate. She's not just a good student, sir. She's the county valedictorian. 4.0 GPA. Full academic scholarship to Georgetown University, pending graduation. 2 weeks ago, she was named a U.S. Presidential Scholar, one of the top 160 students in the entire nation. Arthur stared at the paper. A presidential scholar throwing away her future to wash my dishes. That, sir, George said quietly, is the problem. He slid a second paper over. It was a formal attendance report from the school district. I spoke with the principal at Northwood High. She was very emotional. As of 25 days ago, Claire Miller stopped attending school. She has been marked for truancy. The principal is heartbroken. She said she's been calling the mother, Helen, but the number is disconnected. 25 days, Arthur whispered. The timeline clicked. The pattern was forming. Yes, sir. She has missed the deadline to accept the scholarship. The school is required to report her truancy to the state. She will not graduate the scholarship. It's gone. The waste of it. The sheer, tragic waste. It felt like a physical blow to Arthur. This was worse than a girl skipping school. This was a bright light being snuffed out. Why, George? Arthur asked, his voice low. Why? The mother. George's voice was grim. Helen Miller. It is not a bad cold. She was diagnosed 2 months ago with a severe aggressive form of lupus. The new treatments, the specialist, her insurance denies them as experimental. The out-of-pocket cost for the main prescription is $900 a month. Arthur felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Helen was fired from her second job at a dry cleaner for missing days due to her illness. Your job, this, is all they have. The phone was disconnected to save money. $900 a month, Arthur said. It was, to him, nothing. A rounding error. To them, it was a future. Claire knows, Arthur stated. She's been skipping school to, what, work? I'm still looking into that, George said. But it seems she is also covering her mother's shifts, unpaid. Cleaning this house, just to keep you from firing her. She's trying to hold on to the job and the health insurance that her mother is too sick to perform. Arthur stood up, the anger and the sadness rising in him. He walked to the window. The soldier, George, the photo. George slid the last piece of paper across the desk. It was a grainy, black and white military file photo. Captain Robert Miller, George said. Claire's grandfather, Helen's father. Baker Company, 101st Airborne Division, served 2 tours, highly decorated, passed away in 2010. Arthur looked at the name, and then his blood ran cold. Baker Company. He turned from the window, He walked to a framed photo on his bookshelf. It was a photo he had not truly looked at in years. A group of young men in fatigues, smiling in a dusty foreign jungle. "My brother," Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. "My older brother Thomas. He was in Baker Company. He didn't come home." Arthur looked at George, his eyes clear and hard as ice. "This is not an employee, George. This is family." "Sir?" "Get me their address," Arthur said, his voice low and dangerous. "And find out where Claire Miller is right now." The address was a gray, worn-down apartment complex in a part of town Arthur hadn't seen in 40 years. He drove himself in his modest sedan, not the Rolls-Royce. He felt the need to be invisible. The building smelled of boiled cabbage and old carpet. He walked up 3 flights of stairs. The concrete was cracked. He knocked on 3B. He heard a slow, painful shuffling. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. An eye peered out. "Susan?" Arthur said gently. The door slammed shut. He heard a muffled sob, then the rattling of the chain. The door opened. The woman who stood before him was a ghost. She was a decade younger than Arthur, but she looked 20 years older. Her hands were swollen into claws. Her face was gray with pain. She leaned heavily on a metal walker. This was not the neat, capable woman who managed his home. "Mr. Coleman," she gasped, her voice thick with shame. I was going to call. I've been—" "Helen," Arthur said, stopping her. "I came to see you." He stepped into the tiny, bare apartment. It was spotless, but it was cold. A single, small electric heater glowed weakly in the corner. "I saw Claire last night," he said. Helen's face crumpled. She sank onto the worn sofa. "Oh God, she promised. I told her not to. I told her I can still work. I just needed a few days." "Helen, why didn't you tell me you were sick?" "And say what?" she whispered, tears rolling down her pale cheeks. "That I can't do my job, that you should fire me. This job, it's all we have. The insurance, it pays for the basic doctor visits. It's everything." "The scholarship," Arthur said, his voice quiet. Helen's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide with a new, sharper pain. "The presidential scholarship, Helen Georgetown. I know." Susan let out a sound. It was not a cry. It was a wail of pure, unfiltered despair from the bottom of her soul. I found the letter," she sobbed. "The one from the White House. I found it in the trash can. In the trash. I asked her, and she looked at me with those empty, tired eyes. And she said, 'What's a scholarship, Mom? Does it pay for your medicine? Does it keep the lights on?'" Helen gripped her own hair, her swollen fingers shaking. "She's throwing it all away. Her whole, beautiful life. For me. For $900. Arthur felt the pieces of his heart breaking. This was a kind of poverty he had forgotten existed, the poverty of impossible choices. "Where is she, Helen? Where is she right now?" She got a job," Helen whispered, looking away, as if confessing a crime. "A real one, a night shift, so she can be here during the day in case I fall. It's at a diner, the Evening Star, downtown." "Stay here," Arthur said. "Lock your door. I will be back." The Evening Star diner was loud, bright, and smelled of stale coffee and grease. Arthur Coleman felt like he had walked onto a different planet. He took a booth in the corner, his tailored wool coat feeling like a costume. A waitress, older, with a kind, tired face, came over. "What'll it be, honey?" "Just coffee, black," Arthur said. He scanned the room, and then he saw her. Claire was moving through the tables, a heavy brown tray balanced on one arm. Her blonde ponytail was hidden under a blue hairnet. Her uniform was a size too big, the name Patty stitched in red on the pocket. She moved with a grim, mechanical efficiency. She did not smile. She refilled water glasses, cleared plates, and took orders. She was 17, a presidential scholar, and she looked like she had been doing this for a lifetime. He watched her wince when she lifted a heavy bus tub full of plates. He saw the manager, a short, angry-looking man in a stained white shirt, bark an order at her. She just nodded, her face blank, and kept moving. She's just like her mother, Arthur thought, trying not to surrender. He waited. He nursed his coffee, which was bitter and thin. He watched her for 20 minutes. He watched her run. He watched her try to be invisible. She was clearing the booth next to him. Her arms were overloaded with plates. "Claire," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the diner's noise. She froze. The clatter of plates in her hand stopped. She turned, slowly, her eyes finding him in the corner. Her face went from pale to white. The blood drained from it. She looked at him. She looked at her greasy uniform. She looked at the half-eaten burger on the plate she was holding, and the tray, overloaded and heavy, slipped from her trembling hands. It hit the floor with a deafening crash. Plates shattered. Glasses exploded, ketchup and leftover food splattered across the linoleum. The entire diner went silent. Claire just stood there, staring at the mess. Staring at him, her shoulders began to shake. "Miller!" the manager roared from behind the counter. His name tag said, "Mitch." "What do you think you're doing? That's coming out of your pay." Claire didn't look at the manager. She just looked at Arthur. Her eyes, which had been so terrified in the kitchen, were now filled with a different, deeper emotion, utter and complete humiliation. She dropped to her knees and, with her bare hands, began picking up the broken shards of glass. "Miller, get a broom. Get that cleaned up. Now!" Mitch was screaming. He was red in the face. "You're lucky I don't fire you on the spot. That's a week's pay and breakage, you stupid. That's enough." Arthur's voice was not loud. It was low, cold, and heavy with authority. It cut through the diner's silence more effectively than Mitch's shouting. Arthur stood from his booth. He walked over and stood directly between the manager and the girl on the floor. He was a foot taller than Mitch, and though he was nearly 70, he carried an air of absolute power. Mitch, who had been focused on Claire, now looked at Arthur for the first time. He saw the expensive coat. He saw the gold watch. He saw the face of a man who did not belong in the Evening Star diner. "And who are you?" Mitch blustered, though his voice had lost its edge. "This is my employee. She is a child," Arthur said, cutting him off. "A child who is clearly unwell." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a leather wallet, and extracted several bills. 3 $100 bills. He dropped them on the counter. "That," he said, "is for the broken plates, and for my coffee, and for the inconvenience." Mitch's eyes went wide. He scooped up the money instantly. Arthur then turned his back on Mitch, a complete dismissive act. He crouched down, his knees protesting slightly. He was now at eye level with Claire. She was crying, silent tears tracing paths through the grime on her face. She was still trying to pick up the broken glass, her hands shaking. "Claire," he said, his voice now gentle but firm. "Get up. You're leaving." I can't," she whispered, the words choked. My shift. I need—" "Your shift is over." He offered his hand. It was a clean, steady hand, a hand that signed billion-dollar contracts. She stared at it for a moment. It was a lifeline. Slowly, trembling, she put her small, greasy hand into his. Arthur pulled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. He did not let go. He kept her hand in his and turned her toward the door, shielding her from the stares of the other patrons. "Wait!" Mitch called out, suddenly realizing he was losing an employee, even one he mistreated. "You can't just— She has to—" Arthur paused at the door. He looked back at Mitch. "She's finished," he said. And the way he said it, Mitch knew it was true. Arthur Coleman pushed open the glass door and guided Claire Miller out into the cold night air, leaving the shattered plates and the smell of fried onions behind. The car was a cocoon of silence. It was a dark, heavy sedan, not one of Arthur's flashier models. It smelled of old leather and, faintly, of his pipe tobacco. It was warm. The heated seats hummed gently against Claire's back, but she was so cold she couldn't feel it. She sat rigid, her hands clasped in her lap, still grimy from the diner floor. She stared straight ahead at the dashboard clock. 11:47 p.m. She had not said a word since he put her in the car. She was vibrating with a silent, terrible shame. He had seen her at her lowest. He had seen her fail. Arthur drove carefully, his large hands resting lightly on the wheel. He did not turn on the radio. The only sound was the thump-thump of the wipers clearing a light mist from the windshield. He glanced at her. She was just an outline in the dark, her face turned away. "Your hands," he said, his voice quiet. "Are they cut?" Claire flinched, startled by the sound. "What?" "The glass. Are you cut?" She slowly unclenched her fists and looked down. She hadn't felt it. There was a small, dark line of blood across her right palm. I don't know. It's fine." Arthur sighed. He pulled the car over to the curb on a quiet, tree-lined street. He put the car in park and turned on the interior light. It was a soft, yellow light, like a reading lamp. In it, he saw her. Her face was smudged with dirt. Her hair was matted where the hairnet had been. The small cut on her hand was welling up with blood. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "What are you doing?" "This will sting," he said. He did not answer her question. He reached into the glove compartment. His car was, like his life, organized. He pulled out a small, black first aid kit. He opened it, took out an antiseptic wipe and a bandage. "Give me your hand," he commanded. "No, it's fine. Really, I'm getting grease on your car." She tried to hide her hands under her legs. "Claire." His voice was gentle, but it held the same steel as it had in the diner. "Give me your hand." She hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, held out her trembling hand. He took it. His own hand was warm and surprisingly soft, but his grip was firm. He held her small, chapped hand in his. He carefully blotted the blood, then opened the wipe. She hissed as the alcohol touched the cut. "I told you," he said, his eyes on his work. "A small price. My brother Thomas always said that a little sting now is better than a lot of pain later." He worked with a precise, almost tender care. He cleaned the cut, then wrapped the bandage around her palm. His movements were not rushed. She watched him, her breath caught in her chest. This was Arthur Coleman, a man who moved markets, a man who owned half the city, and he was sitting in a parked car, bandaging her hand like a father. The absurdity of it, the kindness of it, broke through her shame. A single hot tear spilled over and ran down her cheek. Then another. He finished with the bandage and handed her a clean, folded handkerchief from his coat pocket. "For your face," he said, not looking at her. He put the car back in gear and pulled out into the street. She wiped her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were small and hoarse. "You're welcome," he said. They drove in silence for another few blocks. "Georgetown," he said. "Sir? That's the plan, isn't it? Or it was Georgetown University. Why?" She stared at the handkerchief in her lap. I like history and the government. I thought I could work in the State Department or something." "You want to serve?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "A noble goal," he said. "Difficult to achieve if you are not in fact in school." Her shame returned, hot and sharp. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand, Claire," he said, his voice reasonable. "I see a young woman, a U.S. presidential scholar, the valedictorian of her class. She has a full scholarship to a fine university, and she throws it all in the trash. I didn't throw it away, she snapped, her voice breaking. The anger she felt at the world, at the unfairness of it, all came rushing out. I didn't. What was I supposed to do? She was crying openly now, the sobs she had held back in the diner finally shaking her. What choice did I have? I came home from school. I'd just gotten the letter, the one from the White House. I was so happy. I ran inside, and Mom was on the floor. She couldn't get up. She was in so much pain, she couldn't even cry. Arthur listened. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The doctor said, lupus. He said her old medicine wasn't working. He said she needed a new one. A specialist. And the insurance? It doesn't pay its $900 every month, just for the pills. That's not even the doctor. Or the tests. She wiped her nose with his handkerchief, past caring about appearances. She lost her other job. This job at your house. It's all we have. I saw her trying to scrub the floors, and she just cried because her hands were too swollen. She was going to get fired. We were going to lose the apartment. We were going to lose everything. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So I put the letter in the trash. I called the school and told them I wasn't coming back. I took her phone. I blocked the principal's number. I had to. So she couldn't call Mom. And you started working? Arthur said. I had to cover her shifts at your house. For free. Just so George wouldn't know she was sick and I got the job at the diner. The night shift. It was $11 an hour. I was saving up. For the medicine. I almost had it, I just needed one more week. She was spent. The confession left her hollow. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. I hate it, she whispered. I hate it, but I love my mom. I couldn't go to history class. I couldn't write papers on policy while my mom was disappearing. What's a scholarship if I lose my mom? Arthur was silent. He drove. He was processing. This was not a girl skipping school. This was a soldier. A soldier making a tactical, terrible choice. A soldier on a losing front. He pulled up in front of her gray apartment building, the same one he had visited that afternoon. You are very much like your mother, he said. What? She lied to me too, he said, turning to her. She tried to hide her illness, to protect her job, to protect you. You lied to me, to protect her. You're a family of terrible liars, and you are both very, very bad at it. A small, watery smile almost touched her lips. You're also both very proud, he said, and your pride is costing you your future. It's costing your mother her health. It's our problem, sir. I'll pay you back. For the plates. I don't know how. Stop talking about the plates, he said, annoyance in his voice. The plates do not matter. The diner does not matter. The $900 does not matter. It matters to us. It does not matter, he repeated, and this time his voice was absolute. Get out of the car. We are going to see your mother. The walk up the 3 flights of stairs was different this time. Claire was in front, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Arthur was behind, a steady, implacable presence. Claire fumbled with the key, her bandaged hand making it difficult. She finally got the door open. The apartment was dark, lit only by the same weak electric heater. Helen was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket, her face a mask of pure terror. She had clearly been waiting by the door, imagining every possible terrible outcome. When she saw Claire, in the dirty diner uniform, she gasped, Claire! Oh, baby, what happened? Are you hurt? Then she saw Arthur Coleman filling the doorway behind her. Helen's face went from fear to a deep, profound shame. She tried to stand, to be the housekeeper, but her legs were too weak. She sank back down. Mr. Coleman, she whispered. her voice cracking. I I don't know what to say. She, she, she has been working a night shift at a diner, Arthur said, stepping into the small room, to pay for your medicine, the medicine you didn't tell me you needed. The truth hung in the cold air, stark and ugly. Helen looked at Claire. Claire looked at the floor. You told him? Helen whispered to her daughter. He was there, Mom. At the diner. I dropped a tray I broke. I broke everything. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Claire's defenses crumbled. She rushed to the sofa and collapsed, burying her head in her mother's lap, sobbing. Helen wrapped her arms around her daughter, her own swollen, painful hands stroking her hair. She looked up at Arthur, who stood over them like a judge. Please, Helen begged, tears streaming down her face. Please don't punish her. It's my fault. All of it. I got sick. I couldn't. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for whatever she broke. I'll work for free. Just, please, don't call the police. Don't hurt my daughter. Arthur looked at the two women, clinging to each other in a sea of debt and sickness and fear. He felt a sudden, sharp ache in his chest. It was not his heart. It was something older. It was the memory of his own mother after the telegram came. The memory of a house that had all the money in the world and no joy at all. Hurt her? He said, his voice softer than he intended. Helen, I am not here to hurt her. I am here to stop you from hurting her. Helen looked up, confused. What? You. Your pride. Her pride. You are letting her destroy her entire life. Her entire brilliant life. Because you are too proud to ask for help. Help? Helen said, as if the word was foreign. From who? Who? Who helps people like us? I do, Arthur said simply. He walked over to the single worn armchair and sat down. He was no longer the imposing billionaire. He was just an old man in a small, cold room. This is what is going to happen, he said. He was not asking. He was stating facts. Tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., a car will be here. It will take you, Helen, to the Cleveland Clinic. I have spoken to a doctor there, a Dr. Eris. He is the best specialist in the country for your condition. He is an old friend. Helen was staring at him, her mouth open. I can't. The cost. I can't. You will not be discussing costs, Arthur said. You will be discussing your health. All of it. The transportation, the treatment, the medicine is handled. It is paid for. But why? He held up a hand. I am not finished. Claire. Claire lifted her tear-stained face from her mother's lap. My assistant, George, will be at Northwood High School at 8 a.m. He will be meeting with your principal. He will explain the family emergency that caused your absence. He will explain that you will be taking your final exams. You will graduate. Your truancy record will be corrected. Claire's eyes were wide. But the scholarship, I missed the deadline. It's gone. Deadlines, Arthur said, a rare, thin smile touching his lips, are often just suggestions for people who are not persuasive. George is very, very persuasive. He will be speaking with the admissions board at Georgetown this evening. You will accept your scholarship. You will go to Washington in the fall. That is final. The room was silent. Helen and Claire just stared at him. They were in shock. He had, in 2 minutes, solved problems that had been crushing them for months. Helen was the first to speak. Her voice was a fragile whisper. Mr. Coleman, why? This is charity. We can't accept. It's too much. Arthur leaned forward. The weariness of his 3 a.m. insomnia was back. But it was a different kind of weariness. It is not charity, Helen. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face. I came here this afternoon. I saw your apartment. I saw a photograph by your door. Helen glanced at the small, cluttered side table. A photograph? A small one, a man in a uniform, an army uniform. Helen's hand went to her throat. My father. My dad. Robert Miller, Arthur said. Yes, Helen said, her voice full of a daughter's pride. Captain Robert Miller. Arthur nodded slowly. I knew it, he whispered. I thought, but I had to be sure. You knew my father? No, Arthur said. I never had the honor. But I knew of him. He paused, gathering the words. This was a story he had not told in 50 years. I had an older brother, Arthur said, his voice distant, his eyes looking at the wall, at the past. His name was Thomas, Tommy. He was everything I was not. He was loud and funny and brave. I adored him. Claire and Helen listened, unmoving. I was in college studying business. He enlisted. 101st Airborne. He was sent to Vietnam, Baker Company. Helen's eyes widened. That was my father's company. Yes, Arthur said. Your father was his captain. Tommy. He didn't come home. He was 20 years old. It destroyed my mother. It broke our family. He looked down at his own hands, the hands that had built an empire. After it happened, my mother, she just faded. But then, a letter came. It was from a Captain Robert Miller, from your father. He wrote about Tommy. He said my brother was brave. He told a story about how my brother had saved 2 other men. He told my mother that Tommy wasn't alone, that he held his hand. He told her he was proud to have served with him. Arthur had to stop. He cleared his throat. He wrote 3 letters, Helen, to a woman he had never met, about a boy she had lost. Those letters, they were the only thing that kept my mother alive. They were a gift of peace. He gave my brother back to us. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his wallet. From a worn, hidden fold, he took out a small, square piece of paper. It was old, cracked at the folds. It was a photograph, the same one from his bookshelf, a group of young men in the jungle. He handed it to Helen. She took it with a shaking hand. She saw a group of tired, smiling boys. And in the center, a young man with a kind, strong face. And next to him, a taller, grinning boy with his arm slung over his shoulder. That's my father, Helen whispered, her finger tracing the face. And that, Arthur said, pointing to the grinning boy, is my brother, Tommy. Claire leaned in, her eyes wide. She saw her grandfather, young and vital. A man she had only known as an old, quiet man who smelled of tobacco. Your father, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion, left no one behind, not his men, not even their memory. He looked at Claire. He saw her pale, exhausted face. He saw her honor cord. He saw her grandfather's eyes. I have been a very, very wealthy man for a very long time, Arthur said. But I have always carried a debt I could not pay, a debt to your father for his kindness, for his honor. He stood up. This is not charity. This is family. This is a debt, 50 years overdue. Your grandfather saved my family, Helen now. You will let me help his. Arthur looked at his watch. It was past midnight. A car will be here for you at 9 a.m., Helen, he repeated, his voice gentle but firm. Please, be ready. Dr. Aris's team will be waiting. Helen just nodded, her eyes still fixed on the old photograph in her hand. Claire, he said. She looked up, her face red and swollen. I expect you at your school at 8:30 a.m. My assistant, George, will meet you. You will go in, you will talk to your principal, and you will arrange to take your final tests. Yes, sir, she whispered. Good. He moved to the door, then paused. And George has also been instructed to have your utilities reconnected and to arrange a delivery from a grocer. You cannot move forward if you are cold and hungry." He looked back at Helen. "He left no one behind, Helen," Arthur said quietly. "It's time his family was treated the same way." He left. The door clicked shut. For a full minute, mother and daughter did not move. Then, Helen let out a long, shuddering breath, a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Claire rushed to the small kitchen, her body finally giving in to the stress of the night. When she was done, shaking, Helen was there, leaning on her walker, holding a glass of water. "Mom," Claire whispered, her throat raw. Is this real?" Helen looked around the tiny, cold apartment. She looked at the disconnection notices, at her daughter's ruined diner uniform. Then, she looked at the 50-year-old photograph in her hand. "I think so, baby," Helen said, her voice shaking. I think your grandfather just saved us." The next 2 weeks were a blur. It was like watching a life be rebuilt by an invisible, efficient crew. At 8:30 a.m., a trembling Claire met George Shaw at Northwood High. He was a man in a simple, perfect suit. He was calm, professional, and handled everything. The principal, Mrs. DeWitt, rushed out of her office, her face a mixture of worry and relief. "Claire? Oh, my dear, we were so worried." "It was a family medical emergency, Mrs. DeWitt," George said smoothly, handing her a folder. "Claire has been acting as her mother's primary caregiver. Here is the documentation from the Cleveland Clinic." The principal's eyes scanned the letters. The sternness of the administrator was gone, replaced by a deep sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing," she said to Claire. "Why didn't you say anything?" I didn't know how," Claire whispered. "It is handled now," George said. "We simply need to arrange for her final examinations." "Of course, yes, anything." While Claire was at school, a different car arrived for Helen. She was terrified, but at the Cleveland Clinic, nurses were waiting. They knew her name. Dr. Aris, a kind man with warm eyes, sat with her for an hour. "We are going to make this better," he said. "Your job is to rest." For the first time in a year, Helen Miller slept without pain and without fear. Back at the apartment, the power came on. The gas heater clicked to life, flooding the rooms with warmth. A grocery service arrived with boxes of food, real food. Claire sat at her small desk, her old textbooks open. She studied. She took her exams. The words on the page were no longer a reminder of a life she had lost. They were a map. The day of graduation was bright and hot. The high school football field was filled with folding chairs. Claire sat on the stage. In her blue cap and gown, the blue and gold honor cord was draped around her neck. She looked out at the crowd. In the third row, she found them. Her mother was in a wheelchair, but she was not the gray, broken woman from the apartment. The swelling in her hands was down. Her hair was done. She was smiling, her eyes shining with a pride so fierce Claire could feel it from the stage. Next to her, in a simple gray suit, sat Arthur Coleman. He did not look like a billionaire. He looked like a grandfather. He caught Claire's eye. He did not smile. He simply nodded. A gesture of respect. "Your day." When her name was called, valedictorian Claire Miller, the applause was loud. She walked to the podium. She unfolded her speech. She looked at her notes, and then she looked past them, at her mother, and at Arthur. She folded the paper and put it down. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was clear, and it did not shake. "I wrote a speech about the future, but I don't want to talk about that." She gripped the sides of the podium. "I want to talk about what happens when you can't see a future. I want to talk about kindness. We think of history as something made by big, important people, by presidents, and billionaires." She saw Arthur shift, just slightly. "But history is also made by small choices, by people who are tired and scared, but who choose to do the right thing anyway. By by a soldier who writes a letter to a grieving mother he's never met. By a mother who would rather lose everything than let her daughter see her pain. By people who see someone falling, and instead of walking by, they stop. They just stop. And they offer a hand. Her eyes were locked on her mother's. My future, it isn't mine. It was bought for me. It was bought by my grandfather 50 years ago. It was bought by my mother, who sacrificed her health for me. And it was returned to me by a man who understands that no one should be left behind. She took a breath. Congratulations to my class. We did it. But don't just go and be successful. Go and be kind. That's how you change the world. Thank you. The field was silent. Then the applause started. It was not polite. It was a roar. Her classmates stood. Their parents stood. Mrs. DeWitt was crying. Helen was sobbing into her hands. Arthur was patting her shoulder. His own face set, but his eyes were bright. A month later, Helen was back. She was not cured. Lupus was not a cold. But she was in remission. The new medicine, the proper care, it had given her her life back. She sat in Arthur's library. She had asked for this meeting. Arthur, she said. He had insisted she use his first name. I can't thank you. There are no words, but I cannot be a charity case. I have to work. I have to do something. Arthur smiled. He had been waiting for this. You're right, I agree, which is why I have a job for you. He gestured to a pile of file boxes on his desk. My mother left a small fund, he said. She called it the Baker Company Fund. Her idea was to provide small grants for the children and grandchildren of veterans, help with books, or a down payment, a little bit of kindness, as she called it. He sighed. After she died, I let it go dormant. I was busy. I was building things. I forgot. He looked at her, his eyes serious. I have restarted the fund. I have endowed it properly. But it needs a director. It needs someone to read the letters, to find the people who need help, to be the heart of it. Helen looked at him, confused. But I'm a housekeeper. No, Arthur said. You're a veteran's daughter. You are a woman who understands sacrifice. You understand what it's like to be in need and to be too proud to ask. I can't think of anyone more qualified. Helen looked at the boxes. She was not being offered charity. She was being offered a purpose. Yes, she said, her voice clear. Yes, I would be honored. The summer ended. It was a cool morning in late August. By August, Claire was leaving for Georgetown. Helen, now in remission, saw her off from their new, bright apartment. Arthur's sedan pulled up. He got out. All set? He asked. All set, Claire said, her smile wide. A few things, he said, handing her a box. Inside was a new laptop. For the political science papers. Arthur, this is too much. Nonsense, he said. He then handed her a flat, square envelope. And this. She opened it. It was a simple, dark wood frame. Inside was the photograph. The young men in the jungle, her grandfather and his brother. But this is yours, she said. From your desk. No, Arthur corrected her gently. The one on my desk was my mother's. This was Tommy's. It was in his wallet when they sent his things home. It's been in a box. I think he would want you to have it. To remember what you're made of. Claire's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him. It was not a small, shy hug. It was a real, grateful embrace. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For seeing me. He patted her back, his own throat tight. Go on, he said. Don't be late. Washington doesn't wait. She hugged her mother, a long, tight hug. I love you, Mom. Take your medicine. I will, Helen laughed, wiping a tear. Call me. Every night. I will. Claire got in the taxi. She looked out the back window as it pulled away. She saw her mother, healthy and strong. And she saw Arthur, the billionaire who had been too restless to sleep. He had his arm around Helen's shoulders. Two people, from two different worlds, standing on a sidewalk, watching the future they had built together drive away. Arthur watched until the car was gone. He looked up at the bright blue sky. He had built an empire on seeing patterns, storms, and markets, and competitors. But for 50 years, he had missed the most important one. He had been looking for a way to pay a debt to the past. He never realized the debt was meant to be paid to the future. He felt a strange, new sensation in his chest. A stillness. A peace. Come on, Helen, he said, turning her toward his car. Let's get to the office. We have work to do. And finally, he felt, for the first time in a very, very long time, like he might actually sleep that night. And that's where we'll end our story, with a debt 50 years overdue finally paid. I hope this story about how one small act of kindness can ripple across generations to change a future gave you a chance to pause and reflect. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Were you winding down for the night, or just starting your day with a cup of tea? Drop a line in the comments. I truly do read them all. If you want to make sure we cross paths again for the next story, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve, so feel free to share your feedback. Thanks for spending this time with me.